Um, so I'm going to start off today by welcoming you to graduate school. I'm glad that you came to this session today. I actually think it's a very important session. Now, you're going to be doing wonderful things, all of you. You're going to be doing spectacular research. The diversity of research on this campus is sometimes mind-boggling. We have people who do research with wind and tornadoes. We have people who do research in biochem labs. We have people that do great arts and performing arts. And so the diversity of graduate education is enormous. And those are the things that your departments, your mentors, your fellow graduate students, they're all going to help you with that. The stuff that I talk about today is sometimes things that nobody likes because we have some problems in the world of academics. So when people think about evil scientists, and that's kind of what I'm going to be talking about today, they think of these guys here. They're fictional characters, of course, and they're trying to conquer the world or kill superheroes or rule the world, rule the planet. And this is not real. I love this world. I think it's a lot of fun. I see all the movies, I watch the shows, but this is not what we're worried about, okay? But this is what people think about when they think evil scientists. When the fact of the matter is we have evil scientists, but they look more like these guys here, okay? Now here at the top, that is Deirdre Staple. He is from the social sciences. And to this day, he has over 60 retractions from the published literature for totally fabricating data and research. There in the green shirt there, that's Hendrik Schoen. He's from the physical sciences. He has the honor of being almost bringing down a major corporation, because when the scandal of his misconduct was discovered, Bell Labs, he was working at Bell Labs at that time, and they were having some financial problems, and the combination of his misconduct associated with their existing financial problems almost brought down a major corporation. So now we're not just talking about impacting the scientific literature. We're talking about people's retirement accounts and their pensions disappearing because of research misconduct. Then you have Eric Pullman there, who's from the biomedical sciences, and he has the honor of being one of the first researchers in the United States to serve jail time for fraud, because his misconduct escalated to the point that he was part of his research grant was to compensate human research subjects that were participating in his research. But he wasn't conducting research with human subjects, he was fabricating the data. And then he was pocketing the money that was supposed to be going to the research subjects. Well, that borders on fraud, and the government doesn't like you stealing tax dollars from the public. So he actually served jail time for a while. Now, I call these guys evil scientists the real deal, and no, they're not trying to conquer the world. Their major crime is violating and eroding trust in science and scientists, okay? We actually have a responsibility. We have to preserve trust. Okay, it's part of an academic responsibility. And by trust, I mean, yes, trust in one another is absolutely essential, but also the public trust in us as academics, that we're telling the truth, that we're being honest about our results. Trust is absolutely essential in everything we do. We have to trust that when we publish our ideas, our colleagues, if they use our best ideas, they're allowed to once we publish, but they have to give us credit through citation, all right? Otherwise, if we feel like every time we publish our ideas are going to be stolen, we're not really motivated to share. And that will devastate the progress in all areas of academics. We also trust that when we read the published literature, we trust that our colleagues have honestly conducted their research and are honestly providing results so that we can build off of their work, all right? If we can't trust our colleagues, if we cannot build off of their work, we always have to start at the bottom, at the very basic, and we cannot progress in science and academics, scholarship, if we cannot work off of the ideas of our colleagues, all right? So that trust is absolutely essential in research. Guys like these, Deirdre Staple, Hendrik Schoen, Eric Pullman, and there's a whole bunch of others. When you violate and erode that trust, you're damaging the academic world, but you're also damaging the trust that the general public has in academics and scholars. Okay, which means what happens then is that the general public writes their congressmen and senators and their state offices and say, stop giving money to these liars and cheats. And academic research is not supported by the government, the state government, the federal government. Okay, the arts are not supported by government. All right, so it's absolutely essential not only to maintain the trust in one another, but maintain the public trust in academic and scholarship. All right, so this is a little bit of a dated graph, but I want you to take a look at this. Now, prior to 1980, it was largely accepted without data that there was no misconduct, or misconduct was so extraordinarily rare that we did not have a problem in the scholarly world with regard to misconduct. They started looking at this in more detail in the 90s, and then they started collecting data on it. Now, this graph was produced by the Office of Inspector General at the National Science Foundation, NSF. Okay, Office of Inspector General, they're kind of like the science cops. When research misconduct allegations are brought forward, they investigate them. Okay, and you can see that the x-axis here is 1998 to 2008. So this is a little dated. I haven't been able to find a more recent graph. And this is the fold increase in misconduct cases that were sufficiently bad, misconduct allegations that were sufficiently bad that the Office of Inspector General pursued an investigation on the case. And you can see from 1998 to 2008, the line is going up. It's going up a lot. And I want you to realize this is not the number of cases. This is the fold increase. A 10-fold increase is 10 times the number of cases. So when you see when this 10, that's 10 times more cases of misconduct the Office of Inspector General investigated because they were so bad. All right, I want to tell you, I want to be completely transparent about this line because there's a few things going on in here. Yes, this could be because misconduct was on the rise or is on the rise. All right, but it can also be a couple of other things. It could also be that there's increased allegations of misconduct. Now, why would there be increased allegations? Well, because we have a limited amount of resources. We have a limited, the federal government, state government provides a limited budget towards research and scholarship. And when competition gets high for resources, colleagues who would normally ignore bad behavior, when they start realizing that they're competing for the same pot of money with cheaters, they're no longer willing to ignore cheaters and they start to turn them in. Okay, so there's increased allegations of misconduct. The other thing that's reflected in this line is as we realized that we had some problems in the scholarly world, there was an increased budget to these agencies, Office of Inspector General, Office of Research Integrity for NIH, and there was increased investigations into misconduct because we realized we had some problems. All right, so this line is a problem for all scholars because, like I said, this violates, it erodes trust in the scholarly world, both between each other, but also the public trust in academics. All right, so who cheats and why? Well, you're students, so I'm sure that at some point in your career, you've seen other students cheat. But the cases that I just showed you, Henrik Schoen, Deirdre Staple, Eric Pullman, two of them were faculty. Henrik Schoen was actually a postdoc at the time. So yes, students cheat, but sometimes faculty cheat and sometimes postdocs cheat. And when I started talking about research misconduct about 10 years ago, it was largely accepted without data that most cases of research misconduct were committed by graduate students and postdocs. They've actually done prevalence studies since then, and that's not the case. In fact, the point of the career which is most susceptible to a bad choice, a bad decision, a decision of misconduct, is when you first get that first tenure track faculty position. And that's because pressure at that point becomes great. You're trying to get tenure. You have to publish. You have to get funding. There's a lot of pieces that have to be in place to get that gold ring, tenure. And people succumb to the pressure. Now, the reason I point out pressure is that when people who have engaged in misconduct, when they were asked why would you do this? Why would you put your entire career at risk to cheat? You've gotten to this point and now you decide to cheat. Why did you do it? They gave 3 reasons. They said, I didn't know what was wrong. I didn't know the rules. Now, that could be true. I have a little bit of a problem accepting that somebody gets to the point of getting a PhD and they don't know they're not allowed to fabricate data. Okay. But I'm not necessarily, I don't know all the cases. So I'm going to say, okay, maybe there's some people were never taught that. Okay. But the other 2 reasons revolve around pressure. I was under pressure to produce a particular result, a particular outcome. My mentor said, I want to see this result, but my data wasn't showing that. And I was under so much pressure, I changed my data to make my mentor happy. I was under pressure to produce a particular result. Or I was under pressure to produce a particular volume of data, and it was just not possible to do. I'm a human being, and I could not do that much work. Now, the reason I'm stressing pressure at this point is that I do not think that anybody pursues an advanced degree, a master's or a PhD, with a plan to lie, cheat, and steal their way to success. I think people encounter pressure and they make bad choices. All right. But we have 2 issues here. We have didn't know the rules and pressure. I'm not going to be in your lab. I'm not going to be in your office when you're under pressure. Okay. You have to engage in this process, engage in this education so that when you encounter pressure, you have a plan in place. I talk about this a lot, and some students will work with me a great deal. Some of you, the only presentation that you're going to have on responsible research in your academic career is going to be today with me. And I'm hoping that you absolutely internalize this information so you think about how you're going to handle pressure. All right. What about I didn't know the rules? Well, that's why I'm talking to you today. That's why the graduate school mandated training in responsible academic conduct. You all have to do that online city course. The reason that the grad school mandated it, just so you know, is they had too many cases of students getting all the way to submitting their master's or their doctorate for committee review and finding that the document was full of plagiarized text. All right, they were really concerned about the level of plagiarism. So they said, okay, we're going to mandate this training. And so you all have to do it because this is absolutely critical. I actually had at one point, one semester about a year ago, it was the end of the semester, I had 3 documents sent to me to be scanned in plagiarism detection software. I administer the software. All 3 documents were they were both all masters, either a project or a thesis. And all 3 had over 50% plagiarism in the document. 3 students who thought they were going to graduate in a week or 2 found out they were not. And now they were facing, however it was going to be handled, a misconduct situation. All right. Probably only 2 of them faced misconduct because 2 of them, faculty mentors had sent the documents to me for review, which means the student had sent the document to the faculty or the committee for review, and the committee said, hey, this doesn't sound right, and they sent it to me for scanning. All right. The graduate school doesn't want that to happen to any of you. The graduate school didn't want it to happen to any students in the past. Nobody wants to catch this. Nobody wants to have to deal with it. But if we're presented with it, everybody has no choice but to deal with it. All right. So knowing the rules, while you engage that online training, you can quickly run through it like any type of online course and finish it quickly. Or you can actually review the material, internalize it, think about it, and use those scenarios to lay a plan for pressure. Okay, now others of you on this call today, on this presentation today, you're going to be working in a lab or with a research group that either has NSF funding, NIH funding, or USDA funding, and you're going to have to engage in responsible research training throughout your graduate studies. And so you're going to get to know me very well. All right. When I contact you because, hey, you're a new student in a lab and they have this funding, don't ignore me or you have to get repeated emails and such, because it's for those agencies, this type of training is federally mandated. Federal government got tired of people saying, I didn't know the rules. And they said, if you're going to use our money for research, for scholarship, you have to know the rules. The training is mandatory. Okay. All right, so what is responsible conduct of research? Yes, it's ethics. Yes, it's misconduct or the antithesis of misconduct. But actually, I think it's more than that. It is about making responsible decisions every day, all day, while conducting your research and your scholarship. Good and efficacious daily decision making. Okay, every day. Now, this sounds easy because most of you will probably say, yeah, you really try to be ethical. And it sounds easy because you're not necessarily at that point where you're under the pressure that I described before, or you're not exhausted. Okay, many of you will be involved in research projects that you've been working 12-hour days for 5 days straight or 10 days straight, and you're tired, you're exhausted, and skipping a minor step would be a very easy decision to make. All right, I'm really exhausted, I've been working really hard, and you have. I'm just not going to calibrate my equipment today. I'm going to skip that step. It's not that important. All right. Nobody will know. Okay. Nobody will know is a really big red flag. If you ever find yourself thinking nobody will know, you're probably about to do something that you shouldn't do. All right. The good and efficacious decision is to follow your protocol exactly the way you're supposed to every day, every time, and never cut corners. Because if you cut corners once, you skip a step once, it's easy to do it a second time, and then a third time. And next thing you know, we're skipping other steps. And your protocol, your research protocol, is diverging from what's expected of you. And that's when we start to engage in unethical decision making. Okay. So if you ever find yourself thinking nobody will know, you have to address it right away. One of the easiest things to do is ask a colleague, ask a fellow student, hey, I have to work late. Can you work late with me and just keep me on task, keep me focused on what I'm supposed to do? And then do the same for them when they have to work late. And in fact, having somebody's eyes on what you're doing is one of the best ways to make sure that you will always follow protocol every single time. Okay, so responsible research, responsible scholarship, doing it the way you're supposed to all the time, whether somebody is watching you or they are not. Okay, so what is misconduct and why do we care about it? I'm going to start off with why do we care about it? The costs of misconduct are high. Wasted grant money, wasted federal, state grant money, loss of social trust. We already talked about that. Ruined careers. Now, it would be great if the only careers that got ruined were the people who engaged in misconduct, but that's not the case. Deirdre Staple from the social sciences that I described earlier, that has so many 60 retractions from the professional literature for fabricating data. He also added fabricated data to the doctoral dissertations of 10 of his students. 10 of his students had fabricated data in their dissertations and they did not know about it. Okay. They actually assessed in the investigation, did the students know? And the investigator said, no, the students didn't know. But those students' careers were damaged anyway, because they're going to go out into the world, they're going to apply for jobs. And there'll be many applicants for a position as a postdoc or a new faculty. And people will evaluate, oh, wait a second, we have 10 qualified candidates, but this person here is affiliated with Deirdre Staple. And in fact, they had manuscripts retracted due to misconduct. And as somebody who would be interviewing that student for a position, I'm thinking, well, did they know? Even though they weren't found guilty of knowing, did they know? I have 9 candidates that are not affiliated with misconduct and 1 candidate that is. What are the odds that I'm going to select the candidate that is linked to a massive misconduct investigation, even if the person did nothing wrong? All right, so the careers get damaged. And in fact, with regard to damaging the published literature, Deirdre Staples from the Netherlands, and his misconduct actually impacted the academic careers of students on the Texas Tech campus, because the students were trying to replicate his work. The mentor had basically assigned them a task, replicate Deirdre Staples' work, and then we're going to take this next step. And the students could not replicate the work. And they spun their wheels for 2 years trying to replicate his work and could never do it. The mentor thought the students were failing because Deirdre Staple was very high status in his discipline. And the students were not failing. Deirdre Staple had fabricated the results. The results were false. They were falsified. Excuse me, they were fabricated. After 2 years of work, imagine doing 2 years of work and not even being close to being ready to have a master's project. We lost the students. The students left science because of this scenario. So what we lost were potentially honest researchers because they were trying to replicate work of a cheater. Okay, so ruined careers, it's massive. It's not just the individual who engages in the behavior that gets ruined. A lot of careers get ruined. Unreliable research record, we just discussed that. Loss of reputation for the institution. You will all be marketing degrees from Texas Tech University. If Texas Tech does not have a great reputation, it damages your ability to get positions after you graduate. Okay, loss of good scientists. We lost those students that were trying to replicate Deirdre Staples' work. They would have been great students. Why? Because they kept giving their mentors honest data. And the mentor kept saying, no, you got this wrong. You're doing something wrong. So their work was honest. We lost them. Or producing bad scientists, people who go into an environment, they see bad behavior and they say, I guess this is how everybody does it. I will too. Now we've taken a student, a scientist that would have been a really good and honest scientist and turned them into a bad scientist. So the costs of misconduct are extraordinarily high. They're largely incalculable. Okay, because it's not just money. It is about careers. It is about potential and losing that potential for science to progress. Okay, so what is research misconduct? The federal government defines research misconduct as fabrication of data, falsification of data, and plagiarism. Fabrication is pure fiction. The person never ran a study at all. They just made it up. They may have made up data, but a lot of times these misconduct cases, such as Deirdre Staple, progress to the point where they're not even fabricating raw data, they're fabricating analyzed results. They're not even bothering to make up the numbers of having any data. They're just having summarized results. Okay, it's pure fiction. Now, the goal of scholarship, the goal of research is to contribute to truth. What is real, what is true? So to make things up in a manner that's just pure fiction is so offensive because it's such a violation of our entire goal as scholars, okay? Falsifying is changing numbers. The standard model for this is that you have this, you've run a study, you've conducted the work, and you have this beautiful tight cluster of data points. And then you have one or two extreme outliers that are throwing off your analysis. You can't get statistical significance because of these outliers. All right. You don't just get to omit data because you don't like it. All right. You have to have justification. The equipment failed that day. I was doing research on an animal and they were profoundly sick. We found out the following day. There has to be some legitimate justification, and the justification can't be, I don't like it. Now, with a true statistical outlier, you can run an outlier analysis and omit data with full disclosure when you publish. Okay, we had these two data points. They were statistical outliers. We omitted them from the analysis. Here's the value of those outliers with full disclosure. Even if you omit data with justification, you want to disclose that when you publish as well. All right. Falsification, though, can also be manipulating equipment. So the equipment produces a particular outcome, coercing subjects to respond in a particular way. If you're trying to control the outcome of an experiment beyond your experimental parameters, you are probably falsifying data. You define your project, you follow your protocol, and you let the data be the data. Okay, you do not try to control it beyond your experimental design. Plagiarism, theft of words, theft of ideas, theft of intellectual property. And I already talked about that's why the city training is required of all graduate students, because this happens too often. If you are confused at all on plagiarism, I talk about plagiarism. The Writing Center talks about plagiarism. Please educate yourself on plagiarism. All right. It can be accidental. It can be purposeful. Even if it's an accident, it is still plagiarism. Okay. You don't get, just because you didn't mean to do it, doesn't mean you're not responsible for it. All right. I'm going to move. In addition to fabrication, falsification, and plagiarism, Texas Tech expands the definition of misconduct. Overtly violating safety protocols is misconduct. You do not want somebody getting hurt because you violated safety protocols. There's a responsibility there. If you do research with humans or animals, there are protocols in place that say exactly how the research will be conducted. If you violate those protocols, that is misconduct. These are not a document that's rubber stamped. I got approval, I get to do whatever I want to now. It's an agreement between your research group and the university that your research will be conducted in a particular way. You are expected to follow those protocols, and violating them is research misconduct. Okay. And I'm rushing because I'm almost out of time, but I do want to go over this one last slide. Two things that are other besides plagiarism that arise with students, issues of data ownership. I want you to realize that just because you designed a research project and you conducted it, you may not own the data. Okay, if your research was conducted in Texas Tech facilities with Texas Tech personnel or with research grant money, the university is the steward of the data. And the reason I point this out is that we've had issues with students getting angry at their mentor and packing up their data and disappearing from the campus. And next thing you know, the university police, hopefully, if that's the case, are pounding on your door. If it's a federal research grant, even worse, if it's a Department of Defense research grant, it could be more than the university police knocking on your door. Okay, so be very careful. Realize you should absolutely get credit for your work. Often you're allowed to take copies of data, but you're not allowed to remove the original data from your laboratory. You can get in a lot of trouble for that. The other thing that I want you to realize is the need to talk about authorship. All right, when you start off and you're just learning, you're not really focused on whether you're going to get credit or not for your work. But eventually what's going to happen, your research is going to go well. You're expecting to be listed as an author. I want to make sure that all of you feel empowered to have a conversation about how authorship is handled with your research group. If you're involved in large collaborations with multiple labs, have a discussion with your mentor on how authorship is going to be handled. And the reason I want you to have this conversation is that sometimes people don't talk about authorship till they're ready to submit for publication. And everybody on the team is expecting to be a first author. And then the fight starts because everybody wants to be first author and we can't have everybody as a first author. And then the work doesn't get published as people fight. So find out what the authorship expectations are and when you should be able to expect to be authorship. Now I'm out of time and